my buddy Dave. I just said joined by Dash, but we're joined by Dash
Talking
and
in
Dave.
the third person. That's
person.
so weird.
The way you feel.
Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. This is a Tuesday. No Talk Juve yesterday, so we didn't really see anybody yesterday. So it was just a nice, really warm, relaxing day. We've got a special guest today, but I'm going to introduce my good friend Dave. Dave, how are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing well. Everyone knows me. Nobody cares. But we got Ben here from the Marseille View. How's it going?
Good, thanks. Thanks for having me, guys. How are you?
Awesome.
Like you said, the Tuesday that feels like a Monday.
It's not. You guys don't have many bank holidays in the US, but we don't have many in the UK compared to the
Oh, he just cut off.
rest of Europe. But it turns out we both had the joint, both pretty.
Sorry, you did cut out a little bit there.
It's all good. I was just going on a bank holiday, but glad to be here.
Perfect. We all love our holidays, though. Everyone coming in. I think we're excited here we love the collaboration, so we thank you so much for coming.
Happy to help.
Yeah, it all started back when we decided to do some Champions League coverage, get the opposing guys on, and we've just been rolling with it. And everyone has been so great so far. So thank you for being one of the greats and joining us. And we're gonna maybe we say talk Tudor. It might be trash Tudor. We'll see how this goes. I've heard mixed feelings.
Yeah, but before we get started, Ben, why don't you give the viewers, because a lot of the viewers are Juventini, let them know what you guys do, because you've got your own podcast. Who knows, they might want to watch some French football.
Well, we do it. It's only audio. I mean, but no, we started this. I mean, Stefan, who was the guy you spoke to, started this up. I think this was it 2019 or something. So we sort of got together as OM fans based in the UK. I mean, I'm half French, half English, but there's a mix of like expatriates and then some British fans as well who've been to the city and experienced the atmosphere, who like OM. So we set this podcast up as a bit of a therapy session, to be honest, because we weren't doing too well at the time. But it's been going, it's been five years. It's been quite a while. It's been great. I mean, we're just a bunch of friends who get together and debrief the games, and I think none of us pretend to be experts, right? But it's good fun. But we also came to realize that, I mean, Juventus, you guys are a massive club, respect and stuff, and like Barcelona and Real Madrid, huge international fan base. Whether you're Italian or not, you would always attract fans because of the history and and who the club is. But I guess we realized quickly enough that Marseille, not only being French and any sort of English-speaking media outputs of the club. So it's been a fun journey, because we get regular messages and interactions from people who listen to us all over the world, in the US and Australia and stuff. And I actually helped one of our listeners last weekend get tickets to the home game, which was, it's always nice. I mean, I've got connections and stuff, so if I can help, I will. But that's it. That's who we are. We sort of cover the sort of news and results and rumors about Marseille in English. And I think we're probably the only English outlet. So, glad to be here and glad to help you guys and hopefully give you some insight.
Yeah, thank you so much again. It's so cool, too, how you mentioned there, just reaching out with people from the community all around the world. That's one of the great things about our channel. I think all the channels that do this kind of thing, it is a niche. And obviously, the smaller your club, obviously going off language as well, like we're doing, it gets harder and harder to really grab that community, right? So yes, admittedly, Juve is slightly bigger. There's a few channels, of varying quality, we always like to say. But no, so many of the people that we have had on have been the only English speaking ones. We even tried like Freiburg, for instance, when we played them. We could not find like there was not an English one, right? And I wish there was. And maybe there is, but they're so small and niche at this time. So like what you're doing for your community is great. English just being the most kind of universal language. Yeah, and you probably get a bit of hate from the French speakers. We get some hate from the Italian speakers sometimes. But whatever, you keep on doing what you're doing. Here we are. Let's get into it, though. We're going to talk Tudor. So, Ben, I'll just let you, I don't know, give us your thoughts.
I mean, I'm sure there's very specific questions, right? But I guess I can start with a bit of an overview. I mean, the context is Marseille last year. We had Jorge Sampaoli as the manager. We had it was the first season where Pablo Longoria and Javier Ribal, right, they're in charge of the club. They did quite an ambitious recruitment, and they brought in Sampaoli before the end of the previous season. And it was like, oh, great, we finished second. We qualified directly for the Champions League group stage. We seem to have a good squad. We're on the ascending, sort of curve. And then classic sort of Marseille, which is sadly, we love our club, but we're very unstable. Sampaoli just resigns and leaves. And then out of nowhere, they go and get Igor Tudor, right? And I know football, I know European football, quite a few of us in the group do, because we have a massive WhatsApp group and stuff, because I actually head up the UK fan base of Marseille as well. Thanks to all the guys for putting their faith in me and stuff. But we debate on a daily basis, and everybody was like, who the F is Igor Tudor? I mean, we all knew the player, right? But we were like, this guy, like, what's he done as a manager? So everybody checking, Hellas Verona. Okay. He went to Gala as well. What do we think of this, right? I mean, we've just qualified for the Champions League, and we lose a manager who's got a bit of a reputation, good or bad, but we go for a pretty unproven character to lead us into our first Champions League campaign for 3 years, and the previous one was catastrophic. And then it's like, where are we going? What's the plan? What's he like? What are his his principles? And it started off really badly, and this is a French syndrome. It doesn't just happen to Marseille. I mean, it happened to Carlo Ancelotti at PSG when he joined, and they didn't win the league when he took over from the previous French manager. And everybody's like, oh, typical. You get rid of the French guy and bring in a foreigner, and he bottles it. There is a lot of bias, and there was a lot of bias when Marseille had Marcelo Bielsa towards foreign managers and different ways of playing football, which are more pragmatic and more sort of attacking or bold or stubborn, whatever you want to call it. And he got shat on by the media and the fan base. Real reason when he joined, very quickly rumors appeared of arguments with the players, Payet and some of the prominent figures of the dressing room. His methods are very brutal, very physical. This doesn't work in France. You have to be a bit lenient and flexible. So there was a lot of noise made around that during the whole pre-season campaign. And it just led to this sort of already feeling amongst some of the, every fan base has the least sort of, like society, you have the lesser intelligent sort of animals and the more sort of vocal ones and the ones that believe whatever the media tell them and whatever the hearsay on social media is. Yeah. And so we played we traditionally play our last friendly of the preseason at home, and we played AC Milan, and he was booed for no reason, right? Before that friendly, and it's like, I'm sat here watching it at home going, why? Like, who cares? Like, people should know football well enough to know that Print doesn't have only one of the preseason games, but it's like, well, you've not even seen the guy in action yet, and you're booing him because of what you've been told. And that happened, and we hadn't quite finished our recruitment campaign, and then we bought a couple more players. But guess what? We started the season really well. I think we won our first 5 or 6 games. We went away at Nice. Before that, we signed Alexis Sanchez. We were like, whoa. okay, for a club like Marseille, a player like Alexis Sanchez coming here means that not only he must have faith in whatever the board is selling him, but he must have faith in Tudor somewhere. And it started off okay, right? And very quickly, it's sort of, I don't know if I could say classic Tudor, but classic every kind of manager that tends to base their system off of a lot of running and a lot of counter pressing and a lot of covering ground. Whether you have the right squad or not, or the right profile of players or the right fitness levels, it inevitably tends to run out. And happened twice this season with Tudor over 2 separate intervals. But that's probably the best foreplay I can give you, and maybe we get into more specifics with some of the questions, right?
Yeah. Now I was just going through your squad lineup as well. I just want to have some fun because, Dash, you can't say anything that's foreign. Your third keeper. Oh, hold on. That's the wrong screen. That's the wrong one. I don't even know how to say it. Hopefully, Ben, do you know how to say your third keeper's last name?
Yeah, well, I've learned, but
learned, okay.
in offline, that's what you would define as a Wi-Fi password.
I'm not even gonna try.
Go on, Dash. Give us a go.
I'm not even gonna try.
And with nous. But
nice. You said it nice.
You know what, guys? The name isn't the funniest part. The funniest part is he looks like the sort of love child, illegal hidden child of our previous goalkeeper, Mandanda, who was a club legend. He's a spit. But anyway.
Interesting enough. See, those are the little tidbits, right? The deep cuts from your own club. That we would never know stuff like that. This is why we do it, right? Nick Ban. I can't even say it either. What a name! Love it, Cameroon. But no, we'll get a little more serious here. Dash, do you have one to kick anything off here?
Question wise, so like for example, because and you know how football's kind of changed now with a bunch of people kind of looking at it from, we need attractive football instead of winning football. So like if you're able to classify Tudor ball, how would you classify as football, since again you're watching Marseille week in, week out?
Again, mixed response, right? So last year with Sampoli, we had a very possession-based approach. It was with 3 at the back, two wingers, but not really attacking wingers. It was more sort of inverted wingers that were taking side. So it was very consistent and very solid defensively. And then Tudor was the same sort of 3-5-2, but the opposite. It was all for the attack, all through the wingers. So the profiles of wing backs that we had this season were very different from last season. It was very offensive. So we bought Jonathan Klaus, who was doing really well at Lens and is one of those players that bloomed pretty late in his career, professional wise. But if you look at stats, he's been in the top 5 assists Europe wide of defenders in the last 3 years, I think. So good recruitment. We got Nuno Tavares on loan from Arsenal, who again was, when you're a club like Marseille, you try and do these deals and get players with potential who probably aren't going to get much game time in their parent club. So pretty early on, it was very clear that the game plan was overload the wings, have 2 sort of ball-playing physical number 10s, two sort of ascends, 1 striker, and then everything goes down the wings, and you try and create the overlap and get as many crosses as possible into the box and stuff. So it worked for a while, and this is the thing with Marseille. We have a lot of buzzwords like every club. But we're a bit like Napoli. It's a bit like Grinta. We like players who get the shirt dirty, who tackle, who run a lot, who sweat, who dribble a couple of players and make the crowd stand up and make us shout and stuff.
Does that have anything to do with the blue shirt and being from the south?
Well, it's that's a different debate. But that's sort of he once people got over the initial preseason stuff, when we won those first few games and people sort of saw the game plan, they were like, oh wow, this is this is completely different to last year. We're really aggressive. We're really sort of entrepreneurial, constantly being direct and trying to create the overlap and trying to get into crossing positions and stuff. But pretty quickly, as you would expect, whether it's the play landed from your system, which basically means that as soon as you get the ball back from the opponent, you're going forward and everybody's sprinting forward. It had its sort of honeymoon period, and then inevitably, for a variety of reasons, right, the other coaches clock onto it and they start countering it by putting two wingers to block your wingers, and then by also realizing that all they need to do is just sit back and not play a high line and expose themselves for you to have that space. So there's that. There's the players obviously lose a bit of energy. Different players, as we know, go through different patches of form. They're fit. Every touch is gold, and then 2 games later they're a bit exhausted, so they start missing a control or a pass at the key moment. And that's how you summarize it. I mean, it's attractive. I think he's got the sort of without wanting to be too stereotypical, the Jurgen press sort of Klopp thing, where high intensity, high energy when you be dangerous, but your system is only as good as your players and the profiles of your players. And I think it's sort of run out of steam when people started realizing that Dimitri Payet, who's I personally would not classify him as a club legend, but he's one of those players a bit like Riquelme. If you put him in, fit, not fit, he's capable of one touch, one key pass at one thing. He would never fit into a system like that because it demands that the whole 11 runs and defends together as a unit. Yeah. And so there were pros and cons to it. The pros were that for the players whose profiles like Klose and Tavares and Alexis Sanchez, who are used to the demands of a lot of running and contributing and being key actors in such a system, other players didn't benefit from that, such as Guendouzi, such as Gerson, who we had to sell back to Brazil in December and stuff. And suddenly it sort of creates a very predictable, very one-dimensional, one-trick pony approach, which, when it works, was quite spectacular and quite brilliant for the first time in 10 years at home in the French Cup in February. And that was probably the best game of our season and probably the best Marseille game of the last 5 years from a fan point of view. But that was it. That was the peak. And it was just one of those, whether it's because he was too stubborn as a coach, or whether it's because the squad wasn't built for that purpose as a collective, and there were only certain players that could maintain that sort of level of investment for so long. It ran out of steam. So that's why I say it's mixed, right? I mean, it's spectacular if you can sustain it with the right people and the right players and the right roles and the right fitness levels and the right technical ability. But if you can't, you get exposed very, very quickly.
So let me follow up with this one, because again, this really sounds similar to like a Conte 2.0 style of football,
Yes.
in a sense. So how was Marseille with injuries as far as like physical conditioning? Because I know, like, for example, and I don't know if you've been keeping tabs on us, but for the last 5 years, Juve have had probably the worst luck when it comes to fitness levels, maintaining, proper physique, always having muscle injuries. So how was it with you guys over there?
It wasn't too bad. I think Klose is probably, if you were to look at our starting 11 week in, week out, he was probably the one who missed the most games, due to partially, I think, because it was a big step up from him, not only from late bloomer as a professional player and learning those fitness habits pretty late on in his career at 26, 27. But it was a handicap because he got 11 assists for us this season, and he got injured at a time when he was getting an assist every week, basically, which was unfortunate for us and cost us probably a few points. But out of the starting 11, not many people missed games. Certainly, I think it's a bit of a special season because of that World Cup bang in the middle. But we were super fit. We were probably one of the most informed teams in Europe at World Cup, that February period, and then it ran out of steam. Not necessarily due to injuries. I think it's mostly due to him being stubborn and not turning over much and not substituting and changing his lineup very often. But apart from Harit, who got, he was one of the number 10s who got unluckily injured for a really bad knee injury just before the World Cup, like literally the game against Monaco just before that. And then Unai, he was a recruit in January who was injured and unfit when he arrived. It wasn't that bad. I think we did a couple of podcast episodes in February, March, where we were actually praising the fitness coaches and how good they were keeping the players in shape and to sort of respond and meet the demands of such a system. But it wasn't that bad, to be honest with you. Not that many muscular injuries that I can remember, and the ones that happened weren't necessary to key players. Or we had Eric Bailly, for example, on loan from Manchester United, but he's one of those players who's injury prone. And so he was, he got suspended. He struggled to get back into the team, and then he was injured week in, week out. So to answer your question, I don't think it was that bad.
See, that's interesting. You have MG here saying our fitness coaches this year are Italians. They did a good job. He's obviously
Yes.
one of you OM fans over there. That's something we struggle with, actually, is our fitness.
Badly.
Like a lot. Well, look at Pogba. I don't know if he's an outlier per se.
Exception, right? Sadly, he's a bit of an exception, I think.
Sure, but I mean, Chiesa finally coming back, but then, De Sciglio's injured again. Bonucci can't be healthy. Sure, he's old. But Vlahovic with nagging injuries, even Kostic at times.
Even Milik, a former player of Marseille as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, he's got a record of that. I think that's independent from the thing. I mean,
Yeah.
Pogba. I remember one of my favorite players. I mean, if I was to pick a player, who would you pick if he could have an injury-free career? I mean, Abu Dhabi, who played for Arsenal, right? He was phenomenal when he was fit. I honestly think, but he was one of those, body made of glass, right? And Pogba, sadly, is heading down the same route. And I think some players, firstly, they have that profile where they're prone to these sort of injuries, and they don't maybe necessarily have that lifestyle where they have the diet and the fitness regime outside the football. But add to that a very demanding sort of regime, then it's bound to break.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. Yeah, you're right. Genetics gets in the way sometimes, and I mean, some people's numbers up at 20, some it's 40. You just don't know, right? So.
Yeah, and so kind of moving, and this is interesting because you mentioned Sampoli. We talked with Sevilla, and they were talking about Sampoli as well. So this is two teams back to back that we've had conversations about Sampoli. So with Tudor this season, so because the thing is, I don't know what objectives that you guys had as a club or the direction that you guys wanted to go. So kind of your thoughts on it. Would you consider this season a success or a failure for Marseille?
So said the objectives. I mean, Marseille, we've had an American owner since 2017, I think. So it was a change of regime. We had a previous owner for over 20 years who passed away, and his wife and all this. And so this American guy came in, and there was a relative period of half success. We made the Europa League final, and we had a few near qualifications for Champions League, but we didn't. And so last year, when Pablo Longoria took over as president, he brought in Sampoli, and they were ambitious in the market for the first time in a long time. And we made second place. We went Champions League. We sadly, at the very last minute, at the very last game against Tottenham, conceded a goal that took us out of Europa League position. But that was considered a step forward. And I think the objective this year was to do at least as well as we did last season, which was finish top 3 in France, which gets you Champions League. Sadly, only top 2 gets you straight to the group stage. Third, as we are now, gets you through the playoff rounds. If you're any ambitious, respectful club, that you're likely to face Belgian teams, and I think then if we get through the first round, we play maybe Rangers in the playoff. All of us would like to think, hey, if we can't win those games, then we don't deserve to be there. That you've got to be realistic. But the minimum objective was top 3. I think that was the objective, and we're there. We're there. Sadly, which is quite frustrating. We have more points than we did when we finished second last season, and there's still one game left to play.
Yeah.
But this is one of the things that if you follow Ligue 1, year in, year out, that sadly every leap year, every 2 years, there's a team like Monaco or Lille or Lens this year who overachieves. And I think the problem for us Marseille fans is it's never us, right? We never bloody overachieve. We seem to always hit the wall at the worst time. But this year, Lens have been exceptional, and it's even more frustrating because PSG had the one time this year, and we were quite close to them in March. And we were still on the positive dynamic then, and we were thinking maybe it's our year. Maybe this is the year that we go on a run and we finally challenge for the title and stuff. And then they beat us at home 3-0 with Mbappe on fire, as he often is against us. And that was the end of the dream. But from an objective point of view, to answer your question, I think he's met the objective the club set him, which was at least third. But from a fan experience point of view, the good games we had this season compared to last season were really, really good. And that left us with the hope and the sort of potential expectation that we'd gone another step forward and we could replicate that more frequently beyond the month of March. And sadly, we didn't. And I think because for reasons, not just Tudor. I mean, Tudor has his part. I mean, his in-game management is sometimes questionable. He sometimes waits until the 80th minute to make a substitution. And then he goes with a lineup where we go, why did you take this guy at the team who was informed the last game? And so there's been a few of those.
Yeah, it sounds like allegri.
sounds like many Italian coaches, sadly, guys. Yeah. Right? It's quite an Italian thing to be very rigid. But I think that's the frustration for us is, he may have met the objectives that the chairman and the board set him, which is get that ability to try and qualify for the Champions League group stage. So we get the revenue. But from our point of view, it's you gave us so much hope, and we saw potential in the games where we were excellent. That to go from that to where we are now feels like a kick in the balls. Really, we're all a bit frustrated, and I personally can't wait for the season to end. It's been 3 or 4 games where we're just cruising, and we could have still 3 or 4 games ago, if we'd have not lost against Lens, who were directly challenging us for second place, we could have hoped for second place, same as last season. But it just feels like these run even in the last 3 or 4 games, and everybody needs a break. Everybody's done with this season, whether it's the players, the coach, the fans. And so I'm left personally with a bit of a bitter aftertaste of what could have been.
I gotcha. This is it's kind of ironic because you're mentioning how you guys had a terrible March. We had a terrible April that pretty much took us out of everything. So we did get a question from MG asking about us, saying we had top 3 as far as sports conditioning. What changed? Something happened in 2018 where they cycled through staff and it just was never the same. So we have a question for you, Ben, from KB, where he says, do you rate Milik? And if you've tracked him this season at Juve, does it resemble his stint at Marseille? This is obviously saying this is a question towards you.
It's a hot topic, I mean, personally, I've always rated Milik even before. I mean, obviously, mostly before his injury at Napoli, but I've always thought he was a good, tricky, resourceful second striker, maybe not a primary number 9, but a striker, man for someone. I mean, if I was to sort of not be subjective and try and be a bit objective, many Marseille fans are frustrated with what they would see overall of him over 90 minutes as a performance and a contribution and effort. But if I'm to be pragmatic and remember, 5 years ago, we had fucking awful strikers. And we struggled for 4 or 5 years to have a striker that would score more than 10 goals for us. Milik is the most prolific striker Marseille have had since Didier Drogba in 2004, who only played 1 season, right? But Milik I think he played 52 or 54 or something games for Marseille. He scored over 30 goals in that number of games.
It's pretty decent.
Which is a decent return. And we paid nothing for him. Yes, he had the salary and whatever, and he was a bit injured. But personally, I was quite surprised. Not that we let him go last summer, but we didn't really replace him. I'd like to see him have a season with an Italian coach who knows Italian football, which he knows as well. Milik is a sort of tactical brain and stuff.
Yeah,
they took the decision they took. They let him go, but I rate him. And again, many fans are frustrated with him in terms of what you would see over 90 minutes if you were to focus just on him and his running and his movement and stuff. But if you give him the ball in the box, he would score.
Yeah, it was kind of like how he did it with us. I mean, he started off really, really hot, and then as the season kind of petered out, he just went cold. So we got another question for you, Ben. This one's from Misak. He is asking you how he is with kids, and we don't mean children kids, but we mean more so of opportunities with the youth sector.
Again, you can't really measure Tudor on that. I mean, Marseille, sadly, we've got such a poor academy at Marseille for the last 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, I can name the 4 or 5 players we've produced at our academy that have got the new brothers, Samir Nasri, Boubacar Camara and Mathieu Flamini. They're the 5. That's it. There you go. Off the top of my head, they're so rare that I can actually name them for you without having to take a second, right? So the issue is that we don't have any. So we've had, Tavares, you could call a young player, Vitinha, who hasn't played much, which maybe is a bit of a hint, but he's a young player who's arrived from a completely different footballing background and stuff. But he hasn't really had many youngsters to play with. So I don't think you can really have a view on that. But if you were to contextualize it with Juve, and Tudor was a coach there for many years, an assistant to Pirlo and stuff, he worked at Primavera, didn't he, for a long time? So who knows? Maybe it's very different at a club like Juve, where you do produce talents more regularly than Marseille do, and he maybe has much more knowledge and experience of those talents and whose coming he spent. Difficult to answer your question. I don't think it's relevant because we didn't have any youngsters from our academy at Marseille.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because Misak is saying, yeah, it's okay. We're just as bad. We only had Claudio Marchisio and maybe Sebastian Giovinco. And I mean, really with Juventus.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
And recently we've picked it up.
Yeah. And recently with the under-23 project, Juve's actually begun forming that pipeline where we start having younger players start flowing in. I mean, this season alone, we had over 4,000 minutes accumulated by under 23 players that have broken onto the first team. So again, notable ones: Nicolo Fagioli, Fabio Moretti, Samuel Illing Jr., Enzo Berenacea is another.
You
notable.
Have guys in the under 19s even coming up to the under 23s. Gilda's. Yeah, there's a few exciting ones, but we've been yelling for years about this, and it just seems like this past season's like all of a sudden they've all blossomed at once.
Because like Juventus, historically, Juve has always kind of been, hey, we'll buy the top dogs. Like, I mean, like for example, they purchased Zidane from Ligue 1 when Zidane was not at the peak of his powers, but you could tell that he was getting to the peak of his powers. Same thing with Del Piero, because a lot of people think, even though as much of an icon as Del Piero was for Juve, he wasn't through the Juve youth program. They purchased, I think it was Perugia. I wasn't too sure, but they purchased him from a smaller club when he came in. I mean, Buffon from Parma, Nedved from Lazio. So you have all these players that are coming in from essentially, I don't want to say feeder clubs, but other good clubs in Serie A, where Juve is kind of switching now more so to a Moneyball-esque, or even like I don't want to say a La Masia, because again, that class of La Masia was absolutely outrageous with Xavi, with Iniesta, with Messi, with Busquets, with Piqué. That was almost like Man United's. I think it was like, what was it, like in the early 90s
Beckham,
academy?
Gary Neville, unbelievable.
Yeah, with those guys. So Juve look like they're trying to go in that direction, which is interesting, because it's something that in recent history for sure there's you know, it's never been that way. I mean, even with Platini, we purchased him from France, and then he came on and just absolutely dominated football for 4 years and was just like, all right, I'm done. I'm retiring. But go ahead.
That's football, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, all due respect to Juventus, and hey, you know, at the very least, guys, let's joke a bit. We have the corruption thing in common, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've been guilty of it in the past. You can argue the toss over, was it as bad as people say and stuff, whatever, right? But Juventus maybe inevitably have realised that it's not sustainable, and certainly, you know, the Agnelli family who's contributed so much to the club economically and stuff, you can't sustain that if you're not winning like Real Madrid are and having the commercial revenue that Real Madrid and the Manchester Uniteds of this world are. So you have to adapt. Fair play if Juve have, right? And it takes time, and it's not something that happens overnight. And this, for all you guys know better than I do, but for all we know, this is that at some point you have to have a mix of both. And the thing is, I think in Italy they've seen that other clubs have done it and been successful, whether it's Napoli, whether it's Atalanta, whether it's you know, a few other clubs like that have had one or two of these players that have then gone to a Milan or an Inter. There comes a point that if you don't have the cash to buy the players to compete, you need to make them. So fair play to Juve if they've realised that, right?
Yeah, awesome. So, question from KB to you. So he's saying, what is one thing that you would say that Marseille is doing very, very well that Juve should emulate?
I don't know. I think again, it's different because we're more in tune and akin to Napoli in terms of a fan base and the connection we have with the owners of the club and stuff, and sort of the coaches and the players, and they know the expectation and the atmosphere. But you can't the same model, the same club, and the same passion. But I think.
Ooh, MG's got a good one.
I don't know if I have an answer to that question. I don't think I can say really anything that Juve should take example on Marseille for, which apart from trying to improve the atmosphere at the stadium and the representation of the fans, that's about it, really. I mean, sporting wise, Juve are way ahead of us.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, and you kind of hit it right on the head too, and also
I'm
MG
listening to
as
you
well.
guys. I'm just going to get another drink, but I'm listening.
No worries.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, no worries. So it's kind of interesting because MG is talking about the tifosi, because, like, for example, with the ultras that we have, and we call them ultras in Italy, Juve don't have a great relationship with the ultras due to some, you know, because, and people can say what they want, they were actually trying to blackmail the club for ticket prices or exclusivity rights for tickets, and they do have tie-ins with the mafia with threatening the club. Hey, you know, we'll harm you if you don't give us this and that, and, you know, and there was a protest recently about the ultras, and the thing about Juve and this kind of the economic state that happened over the past couple of years is, for the past couple of seasons, Juve has been continuously raising ticket prices, which have been putting it out of the reach where, again, your more passionate fan bases are more geared towards your blue collar workers, you know, your 9-to-5 folk. And the problem is we've outpriced them to an extent where now it's difficult for them to buy tickets to enter the stadium. And that's one of the reasons why our atmosphere has kind of taken a huge nosedive that a lot of people have noticed as well.
But I mean, Marseille tried to do it, and Marseille is very unique. In Germany, they have this, right? The model in Germany of club ownership is the fans are 51% owners of the club, except Leipzig. But that means that they set the ticket prices and they make sure it stays affordable. Sorry, and in Marseille, this is something that Tapie did, which has been very problematic for certain periods of our history recently. Is they gave that power that Juve didn't give to the tifosi in Marseille, you would call. And so they gave it to get fans, set the price. There are 7 main groups, and they resell them to people like you and I. And it's quite affordable. I'm not going to lie. I mean, it's like €200 or €300 a season, including Champions League or European Cup games, which is very affordable for a city like Marseille, where the football club is the religion, and we don't have a rival club in the same city and stuff. But it creates problems where if you don't go or listen to those fans, even about the bullshit stuff where they think they have a right to say, oh, why did you buy that player? Oh, why is he on the bench? And this kind of crap, right? They can very easily start conducting a revolution against you and saying, oh, don't support this guy. Stop buying shirts. Stop buying season tickets. So it's a double-edged sword. You can't have it all. You've got to take the good with the bad. If you have the tifosi and you give them that influence and that power, but they fill the stadium and they make sure that when you play home games, it's a fortress and there's a good atmosphere, you've got to accept the bad. And Marseille, we're not like that. Idiots, violence sometimes, but if you look at clubs like Nice or Lyon or Lazio, and those types of cities where there are very big far right movements in society, you get the racist stuff going on, which is what nobody wants to see. And at the same time, you can't shit on your customers. So it creates a sort of very difficult and very sort of tense status quo for the owners, because they don't want to lose their customers and the income, but at the same time, they can't not condemn them if they fuck about.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, because, like, for example, a lot of problems rooted with the Juventus Ultras were more so because, again, in Italy, the North hates the South. So whenever, Southern teams come up to the North and play, it's, it's always certain kind of chants or certain kind of things. And it's just, it's always an issue. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things, because, like, for example, Juve used to have, back in their dominance, they won 19 home games out of 19 home games they played in the season. Rarely lost one. Like, it would be a national emergency if Juve were to lose a home game. But you look at it recently, Milan has beaten us at home back to back this season and the previous season. Napoli beat us as well. It's Inter drew with us at home in the Coppa Italia semifinal first leg. So, and the thing is, and we have a guy that hops on our channel that we work with, Kevin, that told us, and we made a video with him talking about it, where the stadium was a cauldron, where it's like now it's family friendly now, where they have the DJs, they have that. But, like, for example, if you look at the official rules of the Allianz, what you can bring and what you can't bring. No banners, no flags, no flares, no drums, no instruments, no nothing. However, for the away fans, they can still do that. When we had PSG fans come in for the Champions League draw, all of them had flares. And it's
interesting you mentioned PSG, but yeah, carry on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, because there's always a riot in Paris, right?
Yeah, right.
See, this is the thing. I kept it was 2.5 years ago now, almost 3 years. That there was, we were bloody terrible. We were doing badly. The guy who was the president at the time was an idiot. Everybody hated him, and we stormed the training ground, as you probably saw, and burnt lots of crap and big incident. And he was offended. He couldn't believe what was going on. But then he was trying to do what I just said. He was trying to shit on the customers. Like, well, do we really want these people as fans, guys? Let's try and get rid of this stuff. And he, result 2 weeks later, he got sacked. Like, there are some clubs you can't do that, because we are the club. The fans are the club, whether we own shares or not. We can all decide to not go to the stadium, and then you're screwed. Whereas you said PSG is quite interesting. PSG, it is the worst stadium in Europe today. I mean, I've been to PSG games because when I was a kid, I lived in the Paris region, and fans in the Paris region, that there are PSG fans, but that's another story. But back then they had ultras. You'd go to the stadium and there were some violent elements and like that. But there was an atmosphere, and there were flares. It was intimidating, like we do in Marseille, like they do in Napoli, like they do in Lazio, like they do in some of those clubs and all over Europe, But what they did is there was, I think there was a game, there was already a lot of incidents in Paris of anti-Semitic behavior and stuff. And then I think they played Hapoel Tel Aviv, and 2 Israeli fans got stabbed and killed. And that was it. And then before they sold to Qatar, the owner at the time, because that was the plan, was to get rich investors from the Middle East. It was already being discussed. They put a program in place. They basically just got rid of 10,000 fans and said, your season ticket's done, you're banned, piss off, don't come back. We don't want you as fans of this club, right? And what do you have today? You have bloody TikTok influencers in the stands. You have booklets around the chants. You have speakers playing the chants to make up for the lack of atmosphere. I mean,
so is it like Monaco and their Grand Prix?
A bit, yeah. I mean, Monaco's a football club, man. It's like they can't fill their home stadium, right? And it's tiny. But who wants that? That is the other extreme of what you're describing. And Juve, maybe not as quickly as PSG did it. From the sounds of what you're saying, are heading in that direction, but sort of asepticizing and sanitizing that fan base in an unhealthy way too quickly, too soon, can have an adverse effect. Because, yeah, it's nice you can take your kids and your wife to the stadium, but guess what? If you're not getting results because people come and win at your ground, even though you're supposed to be a big team, then is that really what you wanted? And how do you get your kids to support them like you support them when you were their age, when you were 15, when the ultras were around? How do you transmit that culture to your club, to your kids, you know?
Well, we were winning when it went into effect. What we don't want is, I think it was was it Inter or Napoli where they just made a protest. Yeah, and they just did not allow, like there was fathers with their kids just having like a Sunday, you know, no, you have to leave right now because I guess one of their leaders who was tied to the mafia got killed.
Yep.
It's just like that's nothing to do with the football right now.
Well, it was
like,
crazy
there's
because,
extremes.
Yeah, it was crazy because, like, for example, the Turin, the Piedemonte, because that's where Turin is, was doing like a raid, and they ended up arresting like 23 notable mafia members that were all Juventus ultras. So it was one of those things where it was just like a big crazy probe. It's interesting, so because I kind of want to get your thoughts on PSG, because we mentioned it, but PSG from a Marseille perspective, because it's interesting that you say that their stadium has like no atmosphere, because that's why they always lose crucial home games in the Champions League. But so
it doesn't help.
Yeah. How are they affecting the league? Like, for example, we see it on our end and we think it's, absolute blasphemy of what they do in the French league. But like from someone that is in Ligue 1, that follows the team in Ligue 1, how's the whole, rise of PSG and how PSG is almost in a sense tried to monopolize your guys' league? So how is it from your perspective?
But I mean, look, I've got PSG friends and stuff, but without the rivalry, because personally, that rivalry was built by the TV channels back in the early 90s. The big historic clubs in France, so Saint-Etienne, Marseille, Bordeaux, Reims and stuff. And then PSG were founded in 1975 because there was no big club in the capital. Canal+, who are like Sky Sports, bought them, put money into them, and they created this rivalry and stuff, right? And then to be fair, they had a few good players, and it's one of, if you look at it, it's the only capital city in the world where you have one top 5 club. It's quite unreal, right? In the first division.
Yeah, when you think of it.
But I mean, it's again the classic illusion, as we know in football, right? I mean, Italy, you guys had it in the 90s. It was Serie A, the spectacular, the Batistutas, all of that thing. It was the Premier League before the Premier League, Maradona and stuff. And then the smart, they productized so well because broadcasting the image of full stadiums and the cantonades and all of that, they just ate everybody. And then what happened? Liga is the same. I mean, PSG came along and everybody was like, oh, what a great thing. Look at this money, and already before the money, PSG have had one of the best academies in Europe over the last 30 years, Anelka and many of these players.
Ronaldinho.
Well, he wasn't the academy, but look at the players they produce, Nkunku, Rabiot. They could have a first 11, Coman, these guys have all won trophies everywhere except PSG. So you put that into perspective. No, but it's hilarious, man. We make fun of them regularly for that. It's quite embarrassing. But you look at that, and so the whole theory was they're going to come along, and even before they bought Messi and Neymar, it was Ibrahimovic and Thiago Silva, and I was like, wow, okay. I didn't think they would go that big so quickly, and they did well. They won the Ligue 1, and they started being less embarrassing and more credible. The Barcelona episode, right? And even though I'm biased, of course, honestly, objectively, that's a bit, that was a dodgy game. The refereeing was a bit weird and stuff. But hey, really happy it happened to PSG of all clubs.
Oh, it was hilarious.
But it's the whole thing is that the whole theory was they come in and then they will make it more attractive from a TV rights point of view, and that will be more expensive year in, and other clubs will get more money. And in French, we call it le ruissellement, which is the flow down of the river to the small stream that will feed everyone else. But no, that of course that hasn't happened, because their politic, and it's been wrong and flawed, as we all know, because they've spent 2 billion in the last 12 years and only played one Champions League final. You could compare to Manchester City, but it's different because the Premier League is a different league. It's more competitive. Everybody else has the same money and rich owners, but it's embarrassing, right? But what happened is they have 7 league titles in a row, and I have much more respect and admiration for that Lyon team between 2003 and 2007 with Juninho, Mamadou Diarra, Essien. Those players, they would spank Real Madrid in the Champions League group stages. They would beat Bayern Munich and stuff. I remember a game, I think they won a game 7-2 against Werder Bremen or something ridiculous like that. But they built that with their academy from the ground up, and they did it properly. And PSG went the opposite way. And so the whole theory of it being great because the other clubs will benefit from the increase in TV revenue because they make it attractive and more people in Asia will watch and stuff. But what Lyon did is they brought the best players from the other Ligue 1 teams, which kept the money in the league, which meant that the league was more balanced in a way, even though Lyon were better and were smarter on the transfer market and stuff because they had a Brazilian thing. But PSG have just gone out and bought all of the foreign stars because it's all about the merchandising for them, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because it's like, for example, when I look at PSG, I have not seen them spend or overspend a lot of player within league. It's usually they're pulling players from other leagues. Like, for example, the one thing, and I'm not crazy about Man City, but the one thing what Man City has done is, like, for example, they've spent an outrageous amount of money, but on players within the Premier League as well. So, like, for example, 100 million for Jack Grealish, or like, for example, what was it, 80 million for Raheem Sterling to Liverpool, which was ridiculous.
Calvin Phillips from Leeds bought 50 million. He's played barely 20 minutes of football.
Riyad Mahrez from Leicester City, they paid about 60-70 million. So that's like the thing is, I always felt that PSG was trying to essentially emulate Man City, but they just never did it because we can dive.
They weren't though. I don't agree with you. They weren't, because Man City realized pretty early on that they were in a competitive league, and winning the Premier League was good enough, because the Premier League, Ligue 1 is here, Premier League. And let's be honest, I do find it strange personally because I grew up in France, even though I was born here and stuff. But in Europe, Club Marseille or Napoli, but Juventus, especially Real Madrid, we have a real attachment to the Champions League, to the European Cup, which is the best of the continent, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe the UK, because the British people and the mentality and Brexit and all the things about this country, the Premier League is the summit for the fans. Champions League, it's a nice bonus, but they would, if you ask any British fan of any British team, they would rather win the Premier League.
I can see that.
So Man City realised that fairly early on, and it's not that they got lucky, but they spent the money at the right time, and they got Guardiola in, who's a proven winner, and even more so with money, right? But PSG, it was all about the bling. And it was all about the because they'd been awarded the World Cup in Qatar. It's a vehicle to whitewash the image and promote that Qatari World Cup and get Neymar and right. And that Michael Jordan partnership that they did with the jersey, they lost money on it for 4 years, but they don't care because they can burn that money, right? And they said no. They went down the correct route from a commercial and sponsorship point of view, whether it's right or wrong and dodgy or not. But sporting-wise, they completely screwed it. And I'm not saying they would have done better with buying players from other Ligue 1 clubs, but they would definitely have maintained a better relationship with their fans and a better image from the other French clubs if they'd have kept their academy players. Or at least half of them, right?
Yeah, you got to keep some at least.
Yeah, Juninho, man, he was hands down, I think, the best free kick taker I've ever seen in my life.
Mate, it was so frustrating. I mean, you'd play against him, he'd get a free kick. It was like a penalty.
Yeah,
it was so frustrating for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that's nuts, man. Because like I remember seeing it, like he'd have some of the weirdest angles, and then he would do either like everyone plays clips of the Roberto Carlos outside foot goal that he scored from a free kick. No, you guys got to watch Gino's. Gino's free kicks were outrageous. The knuckleballs, the finesse curves. Oh my goodness.
He was the first to hit it on the valve. Cristiano Ronaldo was the next one to make it mainstream. Juninho was the first to position it so his foot would hit the valve. And if you look at all the YouTube things, the ball would not move. It was a straight bullet in the corner every time.
Yep. Yeah. It was funny because, like, for example, it's different now, like with the balls having more grip than it was back then. Because I think the balls back then were a lot more sleeker. So it was funny because he did that because not that many players back then could hit precise knuckleballs. And Juninho figured out that if you hit the valve stem, that's the hardest part of the ball, and it has a different move.
It wouldn't spin. It just wouldn't spin. That was the whole thing.
Yep. It's crazy because it's like now you kick a modern ball now and it's almost like super easy to do a knuckleball because of the grip on the ball and your boots. But gosh, man, I'm just saying that guy, if he played in this era, if you were to take him in this era, I think he'd probably be one of the, if not the best player, one of the best players in this modern era.
Right. He'd be a player that would be like an unsung in the day. Well, why is no big club going in for him? But the fact is that even though he would get you 15 goals a season on a free kick, he was good, but he wasn't top 10 in the world at his position in over 90 minutes, right?
Yes, I gotcha.
Phone went off. I was supposed to be on silent. All right, Ben, how much time do you have? Because you said
I've got loads of time.
Okay, all right.
Up to you guys.
No, that's because initially I thought we only had an hour. So if you got time, that's cool. I just didn't want to, make you miss.
No, all good.
Okay, we're good. We got some stuff from Twitter here. Then a few more questions. The chat's been throwing stuff out, so we've been distracted. And an hour in, and we haven't even got to the questions from Twitter. So, first one, since we've been serious for a while, we'll just have a little fun. Can he be worse than Allegri?
He paused. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, guys. It depends what you want, right? I mean, once about the Marseille fans and preseason, people were frustrated that they were like, well, why is he making enemies of Payet and Guendouzi and Gerson, which were many of our best performers from last year. But when he won those league games, people were like, oh, back to what I was saying about the buzzwords is Marseille, we like grinta, we like you sweat all of your body weight of water out and you run and you die for the jersey and that, right? It depends what you want. So he certainly is that kind of character, and you would not fuck with the dude, excuse my French, but cool. If he says you run, you would run. I mean, it's like if you don't run in training, he's basically said straight away you're not playing. So he set that standard, and at Marseille, right? I mean, the French league is notorious in its reputation that many of the players like Mahrez and stuff, when they move abroad, they say, wow, I've never trained so hard in France and stuff. Because the whole point of the French clubs, their business model is to make them shine and make sure they're fit and not exhausted so they can sell them for money.
Business model.
But he brought, like, we've had years of lazy players and Payet notoriously, he's been a good servant. I've loved the player. I've hated the man because he's had good seasons, but not often enough when you think back to how good he was at West Ham, right? And then he's been back at the club for 7 years, and I've probably seen him at that level for 18 months out of that 7 years, one game or two games every season. And you think, if I was a manager and I see him messing about in training, I'd be like, you're not playing, piss off, go home, right? Yeah. But the thing is, in France, not many coaches have the balls to do that because A, he's a big person in the dressing room, and B, you only have so much talent at your disposal in a Ligue 1 club. So I think that was one of the main satisfactions. People, Sampaoli, even more mixed emotions than Tudor because it was quite a frustrating game plan. But guess what? The results were there and he achieved the objective. But when people were like, whoa, great, You know, nobody's getting a free pass. Everybody's having to sweat their balls off to play. And so the 11 that plays is 11 and you know, the most motivated 11, and they replicate his mentality on the pitch. So even though he's a young, relatively inexperienced coach, he does have that aura about him, but it's only as good as the players follow that, right? And the players that he has in his squad, he's one of those players, like a bit like Mourinho. You need to have the right profiles, the right sort of transmitters of that mentality on the pitch that say, we're going to die for this dude. Good or bad, the minimum expectation is we sweat our balls off and we give 110%. And so I think we paid the price for not having enough of those this season, but also due to how it was last season. It was a big cultural shift from last season. Sampaoli, you know, good or bad, like every manager, but because he's a bit older, a bit more experienced, he was more like, Payet, you're my mate, you know, you'll play and stuff, that kind of thing. And then suddenly you bring in this sort of fucking boot camp general who's like, run, sweat the culture. We liked that kind of thing. And I think that's, if you were to ask the fan base globally, what do they like about Tudor, is that sort of, you know, make sure you sweat your balls off for the jersey and for the fans every game, even if you're good or bad. But the problem is that it has an impact, and it can't be only based around the physicality. So that's the sort of thing. If you know, if Juve in the position you guys are, I think it would need a bit of a squad overhaul in terms of personnel and the profile of players from a, you know, I'm gonna die for this dude on the pitch kind of mentality if it was to work. But then again, the Italian league is different from Ligue 1, and maybe it would work, right? I mean, it depends what the objective is for Juve. Let's face it. I would imagine the minimum objective for you guys is, before thinking of challenging for Serie A again, is getting back into that top 4, right?
Well, technically we are second if you don't minus the 10. So yes, yes and no, but no, we have to do better clearly than we have this year. We've lost 10 games this year, which we haven't done since 2011, which is just as we were starting this 10 years, the decade of greatness, if you will, right? So yeah, and going to what you said about Tudor, there have been parallels with Conte as well, and that's why
they are quite similar. And
yes,
correct me if I'm wrong, but Tudor was already doing his coaching thing when Conte took over, right? No.
So I think
start that far back.
I think he did, but the thing is they were both relatively at Juventus as players around the same time.
Yeah.
Roughly about then. So this is a good segue because we did get a question from Jeff with an X. He's asking, I believe you and I, Dave, on what is our thoughts on bringing Conte back to the club. So,
yeah, we're going to talk about this more, so we won't dwell on it too much here. I'll be easy. I don't think it's a good idea, but Dash.
Well, because the thing is, it's like there's a lot of issues with Conte now versus back then. I'll speak for Farhad. Farhad says as long as Dusan stays, he'll take Conte. But but the thing is there's a lot of factors, because like the issue with Conte is the salary and his demands and what the club is willing to do. Because again, Juve's kind of shifting more towards a money ball, where you know you bring in raw talent and you develop them, and then you sell some of them and you keep some of them. It's almost like, for example, you breed dogs. You breed them, you know, some of them you keep, the rest you sell off, and that's kind of like it sounds kind of really messed up, but
well, it's kind of true, because I do breed dogs and I kept one.
Yeah, so Dave keeps the best one and sells the rest, but no, it's kind of like that. So I think for Conte, it depends on the financials, because like, for example, also there's not really that much of prime coaching candidates that are available. There isn't really anyone out there. So all of them are going to be risks. I think right now as a club, we would have to look at the one that has the least amount of risk. And by risk, I mean least amount of salary that you'll have to pay when you sack them, if you have to sack them.
The least amount of risk is to keep Allegri.
It is, in theory. In theory.
funnily enough, the same for Marseille. I mean, it would seem, whether he goes Juve or not, that Tudor might be leaving regardless. But if I was we're in a similar position to you guys, it's like, well, what's the lesser of two evils? And maybe it's more of the same. But interestingly, I mean, I just want to rebound what you're saying. You mentioned a lot of the logical arguments, but is it not a thing? I don't know if maybe, I know for some clubs in Italy and every country it is, but the fact he's been at Inter, does that not piss you guys off a little
it pisses us off. It pisses me off. 100%.
Yeah, it's a really bad look that he did that.
And he killed it there, right? Let's be honest.
Yeah,
he's great
for the 2 seasons. Yeah.
All you have to do is win the league. If we're not playing in Europe next year, that's where I start saying, okay, maybe, because he is only going to focus on the league. He will suck at everything else. KF squads, and you're saying Chow lads, or more like Kayao lads.
Okay. Massimo Lesti is saying Tudor seems like a great choice for the future, but honestly, Allegri is the best choice for the club, not necessarily for sporting performances, but we need to save money and he's good enough for now. It is, but I think the problem is if you lose the locker room, and I'm starting to get worried that Allegri might have lost the locker room, that's when you have to sit there and you're like, you might have to consider a swap. Because the thing is with Allegri, and this is where, again, a lot of folks look at the tape. I was not for sacking him at all during the season. I said at the end of the season, we'll assess. My concern is there's been a couple of crucial games in May, and as well as last week as well, where you need to get a win. Regardless of all the crap that's going on, you need to get your boys out there. You need to get them prepped. You need them to get out there to grab some crucial wins. We fell flat. Yes, I mean, guys, you could have seen us on Twitch. That Milan game was absolutely atrocious to sit there and have a discussion. We couldn't even comment on it. That's how bad that game was. So the thing is it's difficult for me right now to really get on the Allegri train. I understand the logical aspect of it from a financial point of view, but the problem is if, he's financially good, but if the team essentially turn their back on him, it's very difficult to get rolling with them. Go on, Dave.
What was I going on about?
Oh, I don't know if you had a thought or not.
No. I was just spilling up the next question here.
Okay, cool. So Jeff says, I think Conte can bring back the Fino Alafina spirit back. I don't want him for a long time. I feel like Conte is perfect to jumpstart the engine. Coach for a rebuild. I agree with the financials. And that's really the main hurdle, Jeff, is
what are you saying? He's not French, is he? You're saying
no, he's Albanian. So we say our J's with an A, with an X. But so he's saying essentially, again, it is the finances with Conte. And again, like, for example, you run the risk of, if you have 3 or 4 bad results, he just says bleep you guys and leaves midseason, kind of like what he did with Tottenham. Like, he purposely got himself fired because he didn't want to step down. He wanted to collect that Tottenham money. So he said, this club is garbage, and got fired the next day. So that's the issue that you run with Conte, is he's great at getting your players in shape, but emotionally and mentally, the dude is a powder keg. He will blow on any opportune moment. He's
very un-Juve.
Yes.
I mean, in a way, Tudor, you guys said it earlier, he is a bit the Conte 2.0, and I think he would tick a lot of those boxes in terms of the hard man image and get the players running and a breath of fresh air. But what I don't have that you guys have is the context of when he was there and the reasons why he didn't stay, and he went on, he did his own thing, which is,
Are you talking about Tudor?
Yeah,
Tudor?
from your point, Tudor. Yeah. From your point of view, it's like, great, go and get experience elsewhere, and then come back when we feel you're ready, because you've got the Juventus DNA and the expectations. You were here during the golden age. Fair play, but he'd be like a halfway house. But contrarily to Conte, he's a bit of the same mold, but cheaper, and he would probably accept, just because of his mentality, and the gratitude thing is like, give me a shot and I'll I'll steer the ship to safe haven, but I'll walk away if you can get a Guardiola. Let's admit, I'm dreaming here, or Zidane. I would happily leave them, because I want Juve to win more than I want to be bigger than the club. And that's where he differs from a Conte, because maybe he's a bit earlier in his career from that point of view and stuff.
Yeah,
but they are very similar in their principles and their game plans.
Absolutely. And I'll give you some context on Tudor when he was with us. So Tudor was actually the assistant coach to Pirlo. So Juve brought him over. I believe he was an assistant at Udinese, and they brought him over to be Pirlo's assistant because Pirlo didn't have his badges or any credentials yet. So essentially, like, for example, if we had a Champions League match, it would be Tudor on the touchline and not Pirlo until Pirlo got the proper certifications. So what happened was, allegedly, again, I'm not a journalist, I wasn't there, I didn't witness it. Pirlo started freezing Tudor out of meetings and whatnot towards end of December, early January, because again, I think they had a difference in philosophy. And it was quite noticeable because Tudor left in January, said, I don't want to deal with this, big club politics, blah, 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 and he left. It was quite noticeably how Juve's performances dipped after January once Tudor left the club. That one of the things was evident was how they played a little bit because, again, Tudor was mostly calling the plays. Pirlo was the figurehead. I kind of wanted to go on some of the comments that we missed. David said, I don't think Allegri is as horrible as everyone says he is. The problem is he lost the team, the fans, and the point. And the thing is Allegri's in a really perfect storm of BS in a sense, where you have a bunch of off the field issues and a bunch of things that are happening, and it's all because he's the only person that's there. That's kind of the irony of Allegri's, because there's no sporting director. There's really only John Elkin, which is the owner, which shouldn't really be involved too much in matters because the XOR group has always been, Juve, handle your own stuff. The only time we step in is to make sure you guys don't go bankrupt. That's the only time that we really do anything. But other than that, you're supposed to be self-sustainable.
And he also, he's probably in a position where he's sort of thinking, well, from the outside, if I was a free agent coach, this looks like shit, right? Why would I walk into the shitstorm? So maybe he doesn't feel threatened, and he's like, hey, I'm a safe pair of hands. Yeah, difficult one to read. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then KF said, I missed that game for a wedding. You didn't miss much. So
I hope there's an open bar.
I know. Massimo is rebuttaling, saying if he's lost the entire locker room, then sure. If only certain players are against him, then freeze out, sell the players like Tudor would do, and focus. And I'm 100% with you, Massimo. I don't think we have any difference in opinions. My only thing is I'm concerned that he has. That's the only thing. Again, it's all, we don't know what the reports are or anything like that, because no one ever really does. That was my main argument that I said back then too, in October and as well as April, when everybody was upset as well and wanted him fired. Then I said the only way that you can do it is if he's lost the locker room and the players are refusing to go out there and play. Again, all of your players, not just Dusan having a temper tantrum because the guy can't, play with anything outside of his left foot. It's more than that. So, like, for example, if there is an issue like that where, the entire club is like, I don't think we can get behind this guy, you don't really have much elbow room, because if your team refuses to play, you lose money as a business. So it's, that's where you get.
How long's he been back now? It's been 3 years, no?
2 years. This is his second season back. And again, the quality of the squad that he had now versus back then, totally different, night and day. I mean, it's a very raw squad. And the thing is that I saw someone mention Zidane in the chat, and Zidane and Allegri are essentially cut from the same cloth when it comes from the coaching tree, both from, in theory, the Ancelotti tree as well, and so they're great man managers, but they're not great at cultivating players that really, like, Allegri will improve you defensively, but offensively, and this is the same thing as Zidane and Carlo Ancelotti did as well, where they let you do your own thing. There isn't, like, for example, if you look at, because Zidane was Ancelotti's assistant for many years before Zidane took the reins and went on his own. Offensively, like, for example, Ancelotti and Zidane are both times, like, for example, Ancelotti at Milan had probably one of the best midfielders ever with Seedorf, Pirlo, and Gattuso and Kaká. So Ancelotti offensively is like, hey, you guys do your thing. I'll just organize this. Same thing with Zidane at Real Madrid, where you have Casemiro, Kroos, and Modric, where Zidane's like, hey, look, here's some things, but do your own thing. Ronaldo, Benzema, and Bale essentially do everything. So one of those things where, and the thing is where Juve kind of have this paradigm shift is, like, for example, your best player, your best offensive player is Dusan Vlahovic, who's 22 years old, Federico Chiesa, who's 25 years old. Your really only main veteran player in the offensive phase of the game is Paul Pogba, and Paul Pogba has been out with an injury the entire season.
And our other veteran is Bonucci's.
And your defensive veteran is Bonucci, where I think Danilo did a fantastic job in stepping up and covering for Bonucci and being that leader. But, like, for example, you look at it, Rabiot is essentially your second oldest midfielder on the roster. And you know, be that as may, it's one of those things where you have only Rabiot as your main dude, and Allegri. If you look at the previous Juventus teams, he had Sami Khedira, Miralem Pjanic, even Pirlo Marchisio, a younger Pogba, but like for example, Higuain, who was a seasoned veteran, Mario Mandzukic, who's a seasoned veteran. That back line was a back line of veterans in Chiellini, Bonucci, Barzagli, and Buffon. So it's a little bit. I don't want to say it's out of his depth. Like Allegri's done really well. We're technically second without the deductions. But when you're looking at it from cultivating youth and really designing something or having an identity where the players are
it's
able
a transition.
to go around.
It's a transition period. And to your point, I agree. I mean, if you take Mourinho is the extreme of this spectrum, right? But he's a manager. I mean, Laurent Blanc in France was the same. He had an assistant, Jean-Louis Gasset, who was the guy who did the training and put the cones out and did all the game plans and stuff. But he was the face, and Mourinho is he's smart tactically and stuff, but he's a motivator and inspirer and stuff. And Ancelotti and Zidane are a bit of in the middle of that spectrum, but they're the same. They've got their relays. And to your point, Ancelotti's relay was Zidane, because Zidane is in training with you. He's 10 years older than you. He's still schooling you. He's still doing everything better than you. And when he says something, you're like, shit, if he's going to help me improve, I'm going to listen. And then when Zidane took over, he had all those guys, Ronaldo, you know, all of those experienced, motivated, probably the biggest mentality monsters that has ever been in the squad all together at the same time, Modric and that type of stuff. And then you try and shift it to the builders, as I would call them, like Bielsa and Guardiola's, who will take either an academy player or who will buy a player for 50 million. You think it's overpriced, but Nathan Ake, for example, the Dutch guy, the defender, right? He comes from pretty average. I've never really rated him, but he's made him a really good player. And even players like John Stones, he's actually improved them as individual, their talent, but their mentality and the way their football IQ works and stuff. So that's the spectrum, and it's where are Juventus on that spectrum is the important question, and then who's available to fit into that mold of where Juventus are on that spectrum, and that's the big decisive debate right now.
And it really is, because like for example, and this is me kind of giving them credit, but like for example, Arsenal fans probably have the best patience with Arteta, because like for example, the first couple of seasons have been atrocious. Granted, they bottled the league this year, as you know they usually do. It's like the same as the sun going up, but like for example, Juve, and this is my thoughts, where like if Juve are looking for a coach, because like for example, Arsenal went to that transitional period where they're like, hey, we're going to get a bunch of young players and then start building around, you know, young players and a guy that can do it. Arteta's that guy. And the thing is this is where Juve, because Juve is in a paradigm shift as a club per se, where they're on the cusp of changing identity. And it wasn't when Sarri came in and became the coach in 2019 where we tried to play offensive and do this whole identity swap. I think it's now. Where a lot of people don't understand it, because like for example, all of these young players, this young pipeline of talent that's coming in, as well as like for example some projected youngsters, 18-year-olds that Juve are trying to sign as well, from Boyka Juniors, Barco, and some other young stalwarts that they're trying to bring in and either put them in the under 23s or even in the first team, where Juve is really starting to build this sandbox of youngsters and these really young players that are really good. The problem is Allegri's a luxury coach. Allegri is, I have superstars, I just need to organize them. He's the guy that comes in and manages it perfectly. Same thing with Zidane as well. Same thing with an Ancelotti. Like you bring Ancelotti versus his stint at Bayern where he didn't do that well and got sacked, versus his second stint at Real Madrid where he's gotten those established figureheads. It kind of shows right then and there. So like for example, Juve and Agnelli, because he's the one that brought Allegri back, thought, because like for example, and this is where I kind of hold the club responsible from your president to your sporting director, because Cherubini was a specialist in assembling young talent, very good young talent. Agnelli wanted to still compete, but Cherubini didn't hire Allegri for the second time. It was Agnelli that did the hiring, the president. So essentially you're hiring a coach that doesn't really mesh with your sporting director. And then you have this issue because Agnelli and not Agnelli, but Cherubini and Arrivabene both were working on slashing the wage bill, bringing in cheap talent, players that haven't broken through the mold yet, but are close to breaking through the mold. Allegri's not that kind of guy. Allegri, yes, he can get you stability as a man manager. He can try to keep everything from falling apart, but he's not able to take something mediocre and make it great. He can take something that's close to being great and get it over that hump. But again, he's there when he is, again, like I said, a luxury coach where you're close to the pinnacle. You just need one or two things to go your way, great substitutions or being able to flip on the scheme on a tactical adjustment. He's your guy. But if you're really trying to develop an identity or build something with it, that's where you kind of have the issue with Allegri.
Well, I agree with you to an extent, but you say that, but still, he's like in that second category of top coaches where he's won some Serie A titles, but he's not the guy who's gonna, surprise you and go and get a Champions League or even a Europa League, right? Let's face it.
Yeah,
Apparently not.
It's the reason why it's difficult to be a little bit harsh on him, because like you look at who he played against in those two finals, which is again the Suarez, Neymar, and Messi front line that Barcelona team posted.
No. There's nothing he could have done, right?
Yeah, and then like for example, even in 2017, like again, you have Ronaldo that was absolutely a nightmare for everyone to play with. The guy was dismantling Bayern Munich single-handedly.
I was at that game in Cardiff.
Yeah.
I went to that game. It was unbelievable. Like, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I was right behind the goal when Mandzukic scored that goal, and I was thinking. I remember at half time, the people I was with was like Juventus. Their game plan in the first half was spot on: absorb, frustrate them, and then strike like the scorpion, right?
Yep.
And then not only Madrid were much more precise and stuff in the second half, but Juventus for some reason just stepped up 10 meters, right? The defensive line played higher, and they completely lost it mentally.
Yeah, and that was one of those things where it was just, again, like for example, if you took a Juve and you put it in the 2018, I believe is the 2019 final where it was Liverpool and Tottenham, I think that Juve team has a shot at beating one of those two teams, especially if it was against Tottenham. I think they would have won. Like for example, if you look at some of the recent Champions League finals and you were to replace one of those teams with one of those Allegri teams that went into those finals, you like their chances. So the thing is like, Allegri did great things in his run. Like, for example, beating the defending champions Real Madrid 2-1 at home and then tying 1-1 at the Bernabeu, which was awesome. The following season, or the second to following, or even the following season, he followed up by pushing Pep Guardiola's Bayern Munich to the limit. And then the season after that, taking Luis Enrique and giving him a 3-0 loss with us. Interin against Barcelona. So like Allegri had his moments, and Allegri again back then, Allegri was really good at being able to tactically adjust on the fly, surprise substitutions, surprise formations for second legs. But that was because he had the things at his disposal. He had the bench at his disposal to do things like that, where it's like now it's like you don't even have, because and I don't mean to down our club in any way, sense, or form, but like for example, if you look at our starting 11, half of them wouldn't start in a top club somewhere else. And that's me being generous too.
And you've contextualized it in the Europe like Champions League sense, right? But
yes.
But in parallel, what's happened is Napoli have been competing. Milan are now back. Inter are back. Even in Atalanta in the last 3-4 years have had surprising and overachieved in the Champions League of all competitions, but the Serie A has become a bit more competitive, and Juve, as you say, went through that phase of stuff of challenging, and the peak of Allegri in that squad and that sporting direction was those years you've just described. But they're playing catch up now. Marseille is a bit of the same, and thankfully our rivals are even worse than we are. Like Monaco, Bordeaux in the second division, Lyon have been really poor, but you're like, that's all well and good, but if we don't capitalize in a significant way on our hegemony when we're at our high, we're going to lose in the long run, because those guys are regrouping in the background and they're strategizing, and you're just surfing on that wave of false positivity of, oh well, we did as well as we could, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is like, for example, what Milan has done quite well and what Napoli's done well, I think Inter might get away with it, but it's only a matter of time before their wheels fall off, because they essentially took the sporting director that we had that was responsible for our success, and it's almost doing the same Juventus model at Inter as well. But the problem is if Inter's average age of that squad is over 30 years old. So it's only a matter of time before, you have to really refresh that. But like AC Milan did this quite well, and so did Napoli. And, we're linked to Napoli's sporting director, but they did budget buys. They brought in young players, and they brought in a manager that can really get something out of them. We can say what we want about Stefano Pioli, Milan's manager. He might not be the greatest manager in the world, but he was able to get something out of that Milan team to win the title last season.
Yeah, he capitalized on that strong wave. Exactly.
Yep. And then, like, for example, with Luciano Spalletti as well, where Luciano Spalletti, in my opinion, I think when I started doing more of a deep dive into him, is actually one of the more underrated coaches in Serie A, because, like, for example, he has built quite good squads. So, like, for example, you look at Roma. After he left Roma, Escusio Di Francesco took over and took that Roma team to the semifinal because the foundations that Spalletti built at that Roma team. Antonio Conte took over the Inter club that Spalletti left. And, before Spalletti went to Inter, they weren't even qualifying top 5, top 6. They were, a joke. And then Spalletti was able to get them consistently two years in a row before Conte took over. And then, Conte took that foundation that Spalletti built and won them the title. Is in the same thing with Napoli as well, where, he took Napoli, who arguably lost their best 3 players in Insigne, Dres Mertens, and Jose Callejon, and I believe Fabian Ruiz left as well, or something like that, left to PSG. And he brought in, he did badly. And then he brought in, and again, like, for example, people were saying Victor Osimhen was a flop as well, but he was able to, reconfigure the system, get the best out of his offensive players. I mean, he made I believe it was Politano, who was an Inter reject, looked like a decent right winger. Again, Guntoli bringing in Crava, making Crava look very, very well as well. And, like, for example, losing Koulibaly in the back line, but with Rahmani and Kim Min-jae making that look good, and essentially really resurging Di Lorenzo's career as a right back, because, Di Lorenzo was done and dusted, but he looked quite well this season. So, like, for example, where Juve's in this crossroads, and I see a couple of people in the chat commenting Palladino, Italiano, and whatnot. The thing is it depends on where Juve want to go. Do they want to go for a total rebuild and a long-term project, kind of like what Arsenal did with Arteta? Because Arsenal was his first gig, really, outside of being an assistant to Man City. So, like, for example, when you're looking at a Palladino, who is the coach of Monza, former Juve player, and did really well with Monza this season, and Italiano with the work he's done with Fiorentina, taking him to the Conference League final. With those two coaches, even Motta as well from Bologna, they're going to take 3 to 4 years before you get the end result. And the thing is a Juventus fan base, are we okay with 3 to 4 years of
beyond the fan base? Can the owners afford that
exactly.
time? Imagine you don't qualify for the Champions League for the first 2 years. Can you afford it? It's not sustainable.
They can, if they wanted to.
If they wanted to, they could.
It's the Lantis, right? They can put whatever money they want into it.
Juventus are in a very particular position with the whole Super League thing, and now the current scandal and the penalty and all of that. But it's like they're between a rock and a hard place, and
they are.
This is Allegri. I wouldn't say he's been unlucky, but he's inherited this situation, right? Is that for all the money they spent and having Ronaldo and stuff, why did the Super League thing happen, and why were Juventus so eager? It's like, well, shit,
That's I mean, we've been going for an hour and a half. How many hours do you have?
I've got probably another 15 minutes, guys. But,
okay, so we don't have time for the Super League talk, really, because that one takes hours.
Very briefly, is that that's what led to Juventus being so enthusiastic about the Super League, because it meant that even though they lost to Lyon in that COVID season in the Champions League, and then to Porto the following year in stupid extra time, ridiculous scenarios, but it's like, shit, our livelihood is now threatened economically. How do we respond to this? And all of the other clubs, as you've said, have had time because they don't have that pressure, and take away the economic constraints. And Marseille, we have it, and sadly, again, from the inside, it's similar to the thing with whistling Tudor before we've even seen him in an official match, right? The expectation of players and our image of our club is here, but the reality of our club situation is actually here, right? And it's like, well, no, you've got to take all the external factors into account. It's like you need to start somewhere, but sadly, forget all the money and stuff, the pressure, because the press will shit on you 10 times more than they will shit on Spalletti.
Yeah.
And more, even Mourinho, he invites that stuff. But you're at Juventus or you're at Marseille, the expectation, the burden of the fan base and the press and even the political sphere to an extent and the other clubs, it means that a good player at Napoli and the same for Marseille, it's not because they're good at Lyon or Lille or Monaco that if they came to us, they'd be as good. They might not be able to cope with that step up from an expectation point of view, because if you miss your first touch in your first game at the Vélodrome in Marseille, you're labelled as a flop.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the same at Juventus, right? And that comes. It's a positive of having that level of expectation and that big club mentality of we want only the best of the best and the people that can cope with it. But when you go through a transition phase like this, it can be counterproductive.
It is. And like, for example, one of the things, even though like he's not on the table, but like, for example, I would be okay because if Giuntoli comes in and becomes a sporting director, I would be okay if you brought Luciano Spalletti as your coach, because you know that your floor is top 4 and your ceiling is potentially the title. Whereas like, for example, you bring in one of these, younger coaches where I understand that they're a long-term project, but again, it's a roll of the dice. You might finish 6th, 5th, 7th, 8th. And when you're Juventus, it's one of those things where you're like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if this is okay. Whereas like you look at Spalletti, where Spalletti has consistently finished top 4 with whatever team he's been thrown in front of, where that gives you that Champions League revenue where you can start building and acquiring pieces. And then you can start evaluating your situation after a couple of years saying, okay, great. Can this guy take us there? Or do we need to look, for example, because like, for example, there's 2 sets of projects you can do. There's a 3 to 4 year project that you can do with a young coach, and you build and you accept that you're going to be bad for a couple of years, and you build and you get to the end result and he takes you to the promised land. Or you do the split approach where you take one guy that's good at, getting you a consistent level and building certain things to an extent. And then you evaluate after a year or 2 and say, okay, he's got us here consistently. Can he take us to the next step or not? If he can't, then you go for a luxury coach like an Ancelotti or a Zidane, who again needs to tinker a thing or 2 to get you beyond that. We have a question. Go ahead.
So like or dislike him, Mourinho is perfect at that, because even regardless of the expectation of Roma or whatever, he takes all of the pressure on his shoulders and he shields his players. And there are some coaches like that, but again, it's, as you say, are you very ready for that?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a question from Komika. So he wants to ask, what do you think of Lorik Sana?
Love Lorik Sana, man. He was a great player. It was brilliant for us because he came through the PSG academy, and he was part of a PSG team when they had Ronaldinho, who finished 2nd, I think, or 3rd in Ligue 1. And that was the closest for quite a few years that PSG had almost got the title and stuff. And then he left as a free agent and came to us and said, well, deep down, I've always been a Marseille fan, and look, thanks to PSG and stuff, but if I had the choice. And then he came to us, and we hadn't beaten PSG for 12 or 13 games over 3 or 4 years. And then he scored the winner from a corner in a home game with us. And he was one of those players, a bit like Joey Barton, right? I mean, it's a bit like Roy Keane. He's in that mold of player who, not necessarily the best with the ball at his feet, but damn, would he look at his teammates with that look of don't take the piss, run, make sure you die for the jersey. Yep. Because I'm going to do it, and I'm not the best, but I will be the best in terms of the level of investment I'm going to put in this match.
Yeah,
loved him. Really liked him.
I did too. Again, I'm Albanian, so follow the Albanian national team. So I got a little bit of bias, but the one thing is I wish he could play on the current iteration of the team, because, like, for example, the new generation of Albanian national team players have the talent. They just don't have the cohesion.
They're missing that figure. Yeah,
they're missing that figure because, in my opinion, Husay, he was Napoli's right back. He's at Lazio. I don't view him as the main guy. Where it's like, for example, Lorik Sana took that Albanian team to the 2016 Euros in France. In my opinion, I think if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have made it through qualifying, because he was a staple on that team. We went to Portugal, we beat Portugal in Portugal, and it was a beautiful run that we had in 2016. Where it's like it's frustrating in the recent years of watching Albania in qualifying is because talent-wise, younger Albanian players have been breaking out on first teams in the top 5 leagues. It's just you put them together, the system just doesn't work. And then, like for example, there isn't a figurehead like Tana was on the current iteration of the team because I think you have incredible, I think Albania has great players. They just need, a captain that really gets them all together.
Yeah, charismatic and not the same as like you look at Poland with Lewandowski, brilliant player, but maybe too much pressure and being the striker on top of everything else. And he's probably only got the armband because of he plays for a big club and stuff and whatever. He doesn't maybe necessarily have those leadership qualities, but it's not necessarily the best players that make the best leaders. And that's something that I think I'm 34 years old in August, guys. I don't know how old you guys are, but I don't want to sound like our parents do when they say, "Oh, this generation's music is shit." And stuff. But I am starting to feel that way about football, where people tend to neglect the contribution of these shadow players, as they call them, which do their games and are a consistent 6 out of 10, but they're consistent every game and they do their job and they don't cheat. They never put a foot wrong, but they don't because they don't do anything bling bling, or they don't post on social media and stuff. They don't get the appreciation they deserve.
I love that 100% because, like for example, that is Danilo for us, where he got an extension. Everyone was some folks were losing their mind, and Dave and I are like, he has been the most consistent player we've had for the longest time, even transitioning from a right back to a center back, where he comes in. For me, it's like if I put in Danilo, I know I'm at least getting a 6.5 or 7. Like there isn't he might have 1 or 2 stinkers, but other than that, it's just consistent. And the problem is, it's just like we've gotten into that social media age where everyone's all about the flashy cuts, step overs, dribbles, shots, and all that. Where it's just like no one cares about that anymore, and it's sad because there's always that engine. Like back then, it used to be important that you need a player that had an engine, a capability that was that guy that would give you that high floor, high ceiling, but it's kind of petered out in today's game.
Yeah, it's that constant presence. I mean, Sana was with us for 4 or 5 years, but I just know. I mean, I never met the guy, but it was one of those people. I mean, if you look at even maybe Tudor to an extent, you could compare when he was a player. It was never necessarily the most bling bling, attractive, whatever, but if you were a new player, if you were a fan and you would buy a new player, young player, good player, whatever, there were 2 or 3 of those players back between 2000 and 2010 in many of the big teams where you knew a new player walked into that dressing room and the first guys would be the Sanas, the Tudors who would set the standard.
Yep.
This is the mentality. This is how we live, how we breathe as a unit. Do what you want with your cars and your shit, but when you're in this dressing room, you're a nobody. We're all a nobodies. We're just Juventus or Marseille or whatever. And that is, I do feel that is disappearing from the modern game, and certainly in the bigger teams and stuff. But
it isn't, well, just in the world in general. Yeah, the more money you make, the more prima donna you are. But I mean, it's hard to get younger generations to do anything. Yeah, really. Whereas my grandfather worked, laid brick with a broken back, and now I'm the bitch. So
yeah. Well, it's funny because you mentioned that because so for example, I've met Sana in Michigan. He comes out to Michigan every now and then, and he's here for events. And
lucky you, man. Say hello next time. Yeah?
I will. And the thing is, it's like you have a conversation with Sana, and it's almost like he wasn't a professional footballer. He's just like a normal guy that you talk to, just like the nicest human being ever. Super courteous, super respectful, and it's just like it's super cool because it's just like I'm a plebe, I'm a peon compared to him, and it's just like great conversation, great guy to talk to. So it's just like beyond reproach, but again, you can tell when when you look into his eyes that the dude has the intensity, but also just one of the nicest human beings around.
Yeah, it's probably one of them. I mean, again, it's late for this, and maybe we'll finish on this, and without getting too sentimental or political, but that generation of footballers and leaders and whatever you want to call it, but those guys remembered where they'd come from. They remembered their humble beginnings. They were so grateful and knew where they'd come from. They'd come from poverty or the Balkans war and stuff like that. that generation is over because of, we've been a bit lucky and fortunate that there's been little conflict, even though it seems to be starting up again worldwide. But those guys were humble, and they didn't. The money was there, but it wasn't what it is now. It wasn't stupid money, and there wasn't this overinflation of value of players and their potential and speculation and trading sort of mentality in football. It was like, how do you build a winning squad? And it sort of all changed when Alex Ferguson retired and Wenger, and then the old guard, which was, how did they win? Is they built a bit like France 98 and France 2018. They assembled the squad. It didn't matter. I mean, France 98 didn't select Cantona for Christ's sake, and everybody in France were like, how dare you? But the manager was like, I want a squad of 23 similar, like-minded individuals who have the same goal in mind, and nobody is playing for themselves. They're all playing for each other, and that is slowly disappearing. And not only society, but football, sadly. And let's see what it's replaced by. But I'm personally not really a fan of the direction it seems to be heading in.
Yeah.
But any player like that I see, whether he plays for my club or another club, I have a particular affection for, because it's like, damn, man, like these guys don't drive Ferraris and you never see them in the news, but damn, do they, they've got blood on their shirt and they would die for you, the fan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So we did say we would end it on that one. We have been going for a while. We have to spend a few more minutes as well, just me and Dash, just to go over the little legal proceedings as well that happened today. I think we won't spend too much time. We'll just kind of bang out the news. But before then, Ben, I know, because you're, is it England?
Yeah.
You're in England? Okay. I mean, I don't like to assume, because, I mean, the accents throw me off sometimes. I'm sometimes wrong. So, so yes, Ben from England, the French Englishman. Did you ever live in Marseille?
No, so my dad's French, my mum's English, and my dad's dad is from Marseille, so that's the connection.
Okay, that's the connection right
there.
I
think one of my earliest childhood memories was I moved to France. I was 4 years old. I was born in 1989, and it's being on my granddad's shoulders when Marseille won the Champions League in 1993. That's one of my earliest sort of like visual imprints on my mind.
Oh, that's cool. Awesome. I love it. The last guy we had on, he just married somebody from Sevilla, or from Seville, so he became a Sevilla fan. So, I mean, you never know, right? Everyone has their own story, so it's always fun to hear that. All right, on that note, man, we talked so much. We didn't completely go through all the questions out there, so I'm sorry if we missed them. But that being said, it was such an all-encompassing discussion. Like, Ben, you went like,
it was a pleasure,
really
guys. Thanks.
Yeah,
no, it was cool, and feel free if you want to forward on any of the questions. I'll do my best to respond. Probably be like in a text format or something, but if it's helpful and people have questions we haven't covered, more than happy to help.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Guys, a pleasure to collaborate, and enjoyed being part of this. Thanks to everybody who watched us.
Yeah, all right, thank you so much. And MG, I'm pretty sure he's one of your guys. So
he's my mate. Yeah, he's my boy. Sorry for him for saturating the chat.
He's good. He's good. We love it. All right. Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Take care, guys. Have a good one.
Have a good one, Ben.
Bye.
Ciao.
Alrighty, so we're going to transition into some of the breaking news that we had today, so we can follow this up.
Do the breaking news thing, and then we can cut it out and make a separate video.
Yeah, great. That's right. Great idea, Dave. So, guys, again, check them out there. Check them out on the Twitter as well. I believe they have something on YouTube, Dave, or no?
Yeah, it's a small channel. It's linked. The title has the at Marseille View. Yeah,
cool.
So you can just click that.
Alrighty, guys. So we do have some not so breaking news, but breaking news. Alrighty,
it's over.
It's over. So the intro is over for that one. So kind of going into some of the reports that happened today. So Juve have filed a settlement for the Prisma, or the salary maneuvers case or proceedings that were going to happen in June. They settled. I believe it's roughly around 720,000 euros
and change. Yes,
and some change. FIGC have elected not to do any other further punishments. So all of the legal proceedings FIGC related have been closed or finalized. Part of the agreement with the plea deal is that Juve don't appeal the -10. That was authorized earlier. So in my opinion, to be honest with you guys, the salary maneuver was probably something we actually might have gotten stuck on. So in theory, I think the -10 and the fine were in depth more so from the salary maneuver than the plus Valencia case. But again, potatoes, potato, you can interpret it how you want. That's my thoughts on it. But we are pending, again, what UEFA does, pending, a European ban. In my opinion, and this sounds messed up of me, but I don't really expect us to do much against Udinese. So if we're in the Conference League, I'm okay with missing the Conference League for a 1-year Europa League ban or whatever. If we get a 1-season ban, I'm okay with it. I'm not going to cry too much about it. It gives us, again, the opportunity to kind of rebuild and retool. I understand some of the arguments that people are saying you're going to, get ring rust of not competing in 2 competitions. I don't think 1 season is going to be that much of a detriment.
Not when you're doing a rebuild anyways.
Yeah,
this gives us the opportunity to do a proper rebuild and focus just on the league with those players.
And we also mentioned it at the start of the stream. Unfortunately, the news kind of broke this morning, but it looks like Tudor is not going to be part of the big street, or big street. Why did I say street? But the coaching shortlist for Juve. So Juve, I believe, are looking to look at a different direction now instead of Tudor. So
let's be careful with that, because this came out today, but everything changes all the time.
That is true.
It is silly season. So I wouldn't personally completely strike Tudor off the list, especially since he seemed like the front runner. And like, how do you go from the front runner one day to all of a sudden, no, it's not happening? It's probably somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So a grain of salt.
So take it for a grain of salt. Again, you never know. It could be good. It could be bad. The other thing too, Dave and I want to respectfully tell a lot of folks that if you watched when Dave and I did career mode on FIFA back in like October/September, we bought Christian Pulisic for 20 million on FIFA 23, and we played him as a utility left winger and right winger to compensate for Chiesa's injury. And Juventus watched that stream and have decided to go in the race for Christian Pulisic for 20 million. Guys, we're not in any way advocating for this. We just kind of find it funny because they're kind of doing what we did. But that is the big transfer news that has been coming out. Again, I don't understand how we're linked to players when we don't have a sporting director. That just doesn't make sense to me. But again,
the scouts are out. The scouts are still doing things.
Yeah. And that was some of the folks in the chat were saying the LeBron James is on the bench, but hey man, Chelsea's a shithole. So I think, and it's kind of like Jeff is saying, I think Pulisic offers you stuff. Again, it's whether or not he can stay healthy. That's the main question per se. To be honest with you guys, we need a right winger next season. Like we need a right winger. Di Maria is out and Cuadrado isn't a right winger. We don't have any right wingers, and it's just one of those things, a player that can attack from the right. So he's versatile. He can be a super sub, kind of what we had thought for Milik when Milik first came in as a super sub, because if we're able to, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get him for less than 20, you never know. But there's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of transfer rumors. We're going to try to do our best to keep up with you. And again, guys, we have a great resource. Wow, I am so tired. We've been talking for over 2 hours.
You did talk a shit ton.
So we do have a good resource in the Discord. His name is Misak, or I like to call him Habibi Misak. If you are ever in the Discord and want to have a newspaper edited or a newspaper audited for credibility, type it in the Discord. Misak will be able to verify it for you.
KB was asking about Juve FC and like the credibility. I was like, I kind of need the background of it. It's like, yeah, that's sort of what happened. And Misak's like, yeah, it's Rob from England.
Yeah, so again,
like he knows. Do you know the guy? I don't know.
I don't know about a Rob from England, but again, folks, Misak is a great resource in our Discord, and this is a shameless plug for Dave to put up the QR code so you guys can join.
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
It's a great.
We did get a new guy just this past week too.
So again, join the Discord. It's free. We're not paying. We're not charging you guys to join in our private chat. This is where we kind of talk about certain topics, or Dave and I always give the Discord people heads up on videos that we're making or content creators that we're working with. So always look at that QR code. Hop on there as well. We're more than happy to have you there.
Well, we might as well preload on that note, content creators.
Yeah, for next week.
Yeah, for next week. It doesn't have to be a secret. Adrian Sousa from Rabona TV next Tuesday. Same time slot, 4:35 o'clock. We're going to go live. And yeah, we can just shoot the shit postseason with Adrian, and he's very knowledgeable on just the leagues in general. So all the transfer rumors, all that jazz that's coming up, we can definitely hit up on some of those names.
Yeah, and just to answer your question, Jeff, Kulusevski has been purchased by Tottenham, so he is not coming back. So it looks like Tottenham is exercising their option to buy Dejan
And it looks like
Kulusevski.
Zakaria as well is probably coming back.
So yeah, right now the main three that are coming back is McKennie, Artur, and Zakaria are all three of them are coming back. He's asking what our Discord name is. I think it's just Turin Giants. It's just Turin Giants, but there's also
in the description.
It's in the description. We have it in the video description as well.
The link.
So hit the link.
If you guys are really that lazy, hold on, guys.
He's gonna text it in the chat. And then KB says, ship Artur to China. Also, I kind of wanted to give the folks listening in a big shout out. This is probably one of our more lively viewers amounts in the for a video. So holding over 20 viewers. So again, testament to how awesome you guys are. Because Dave and I remember roughly around a year ago from this time.
When it was one of some KB.
Yeah, it was just KB and maybe Bones.
Yeah,
so
KB and Bones
we've built a really awesome community. Again, we're bringing in new people. It looks like Jeff has joined our little family here, as well as Giovanni, David, Misak, who's been an old friend with us for a long time. So Misak's been a part of the group as well. Yusuf joining the group as well. So again, Komikas as well. I don't want to forget to shout him out, but you guys are awesome. Again, we're hoping to build this Juve, the good old Bones. I'm trying to not laugh here, but again, the goal that Dave and I are trying to do is we're trying to build an awesome community online where we can, sit down, have conversations and talk with each other, as well as interacting with other content creators for other teams as well.
Yeah, KF is another one.
KF squad too. Yeah. Man, I forgot him. I'm so sorry, Hamza. But for example, for the newbies as well, on Saturdays, it is a consistent staple. We do call-in shows on Saturdays where we open the phone lines where you guys can call in, talk with us, have a conversation. If you want to talk about a certain topic or a certain coach or a certain player, we open up the phone lines. You don't even have to show your face. You can just speak audio and we can just have that conversation. We've done it plenty of times with Misak, with David, with Hamza, bunch of viewers, Frankie as well. And I totally forgot to shout out Frankie. That's why he's giving me the eyes. I see you, buddy.
Yes, yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that you were listening, Frankie, because you didn't say hi at all. We didn't notice you at all.
There is more news just on the channel front that I just found out about. It happened today. So there's a 3-step process essentially to get monetized on YouTube. We have now entered the final step, which is the channel review. So they make sure that we're not like a bunch of racist bigots or anything like that, and we're not propagating hate speech or advocating for QAnon or any of that crazy stuff, right? So if an ad pops up before our videos one day, sorry, but it costs money to run this shit. So sorry, not sorry. It's part of the game.
Look, all the other content creators are running it. Like all the other UA channels run ads and stuff like that. So,
yeah.
But the one thing though that we do want to let you guys know, if once we do get past through the final review, is when we're building up the membership tiers and the images, like for example, the emojis and all that stuff. If you are part of our Discord chat, we are going to start opening the conversation there for certain things, certain offerings that you guys want from us. For example, if we do a membership tier list, certain offerings that you guys want from us, whether, it's a personal video or, feet pics. No, I'm just kidding. But depending on things that you guys want, as far as from a content creation standpoint as well, we'll have that conversation there as well too. And David says YouTube Premium Crew. Me too. But for sure. So guys, again, hop on there, hop on the Discord. That's where, again, most of the actions are. Elliot saying periodically joining in from Transylvania.
Oh, that's cool.
And met Kev and Turin from the stadium. So happy to be here when I can. Keep up the nice work. Awesome.
Yeah. Romania.
Really awesome. And then Jeff saying, perfect. I will do the next opportunity that comes. I will join the Discord server. Got a soccer game at 7. I have a soccer game in like 20 minutes. So
man, you got to go. All right. Yes. All right. We should kill this.
Frankie is saying feet pics. Yes, Frankie, beat up soccer feet pics just for you.
Oh boy. Yes. Okay. I forgot that you had some footy to play tonight. Dash cam perhaps tonight going on. I don't know.
Hopefully.
Dash
cam. Get some good footage.
Yeah. Okay. That being said, just quickly, the rest of the week, I'm not sure. So I don't know. I'll tell you guys, I don't care. Listen if you want. So if you got sensitive ears, I'm getting a colonoscopy on Friday. So like come Thursday, I'm on like, the cleanse. So I might be out of commission until that Saturday night show. So I don't know how much content there will be until Saturday. I'm not going to make any promises.
If anything is groundbreaking, I'll go on live on YouTube. If there's anything that's crazy, but I doubt it. So
I mean, I probably could Thursday night. I'm going to be going to the washroom a lot, right? So I'll just be like,
fine. It'll be fine. If there's anything important or crucial, I'll hop on. I'll do like something. We'll do like
Frankie just got one too.
An emergency call in. So.
We're bum buddies.
All right, Dave, let's hit this music.
All right, let's do it. Sorry, guys, for just we spent a lot of time. It was good. I'm not sorry that we spent so much time with those guys because it was great. I'm finding the music, so Dash can take us away.
Alrighty, everybody, tuning in to this week's episode featuring United States. We got cool stuff about Tudor and my club. Hour 40 long conversation before me and you decide to go off the rails. But anyways, guys, remember, do the old housekeeping stuff, the old casual stuff, like, subscribe if you haven't, but even though most of our viewers are subscribers, so you guys are awesome for that. Please do spread the word, because word of mouth is the best marketing when it comes to marketing our YouTube channel, so we can get more folks. I know a lot of you guys have come in from different YouTube content creators. If you can, tell your friends to take a peek and take a look. We're kind of fun. We don't bite unless you pay us $6.99 on OnlyFans. That's the only time we bite. But thanks, everybody. We'll see you at the end of the week.
Peace out, everyone. We love you. Until next time. Forza Juve, fino alla fine.